I wanted to run back and grab her tiny body and make everything all better. To go back to yesterday when I was still pregnant. To go back before it hurt so bad.
Hi, my name is Christine Siddons, and welcome to the One Tough Mama podcast. I am so glad that you're here. I'm a wife and a mom to many. I have 2 biological, 6 adopted, and 1 in heaven, and that's what today's podcast is about. And after 3-ish years of marriage, my husband and I decided, hey, it's time to have a baby and start a family. And we tried, and I was having a lot of problems conceiving. I didn't realize at the time till years after that I had PCOS, and that caused me to have inovulatory cycles, and I wouldn't have my period, and it would lead to a lot of false alarms. So I wouldn't have a period for like 4 months sometimes, and I would keep taking test after test after test, and a lot of negatives. We had a lot of negative pregnancy tests, and it was very hard. At the time, we really didn't think about going to the doctor for it. It wasn't something like today, a lot of people talk about it, but back then it wasn't something that people would talk about a lot. And so in 1994, I finally got pregnant, and we were very excited. And this is our story. So I wrote it down on paper back in 2012. And so bear with me as I read through the paperwork. So just to know, I didn't miscarry our baby. I didn't realize that I had an incompetent cervix until it was too late. And this is our story. So our baby was due in December, and she was born in August. And her name is Paige Noel. Just wait on God. God's timing is what the ladies in church kept telling me. I will never forget that day, that night, as I read and reread the pages and what to expect when you're expecting. I read it over and over, looking for answers. I knew something wasn't right. I called our midwife and explained to her what I was feeling. I didn't really know what it was or how to explain it, other than the tightness in my belly and the urges in my body weren't right. She rushed right over, praying when she came to the train tracks, there was no train to delay her. When she came, I was both scared and relieved. Scared because I felt in my heart what was happening, and I didn't want to go there. Relieved because she was someone who had just had her 10th baby herself. She knew about these things. I was comforted by her presence, her experience, and her womanhood. It was night, late, I think maybe around 9 or 10. My husband, the midwife, and I were in our bedroom, in the room where I was supposed to deliver our firstborn, the baby that we had prayed for. Our rented house was a quaint, older Victorian-style home. It had a wide entryway, big green porch, 3 bedrooms, one of which we used as our living room. Our kitchen was the biggest we've ever had at that time. Funny thing was, it had no cabinet doors. The dining room was a great place to gather. Our only bathroom was awkwardly placed right outside of the dining room. No hiding there. Off to the kitchen was our washroom and our fridge. The baby's room was small and cozy, with glass pane door, perfect for our coming joy. It was set off the dining room too, perfect for watching our baby sleep. As our midwife got to check me and see what was going on, I remember sitting on our bed on the comforter that Robert's mom made us as a wedding gift. The colors were so vivid in my mind, peach and green shapes, all lovingly sewn together. Our midwife didn't take long to determine that I needed to go right to the hospital. I was in labor. I was about 5.5 months, 20 to 22 weeks along, too early to be in labor. I don't remember too much of what I was thinking. I don't know if Robert and I talked or prayed or just sat in shocked silence on the way to the hospital. I do know that my gut was right all along. I was indeed in labor. Our midwife, who had called the hospital head, met us there. She told me to wait for a wheelchair. Not knowing any better, and wanting to stay as in control of the situation as possible, I declined. There was such an uncomfortable silence in our ride in the elevator to the top and the third floor. And it all felt so surreal. So much like a bad dream I had wanted to wake up from. The next events were all a blur. I got placed in a room, I guess a birthing room. Nurses, doctors, people kept coming in and out, hooking me up to this and that. So little was explained to us. The nurses only told me to try to remain as still as possible. All along, Robert was by my side, right side, almost like in a recess in the room. After checking me and noting that I was dilated to a 1 or 2 and confirming that I was indeed in labor, Dr. 1 came in and finally acknowledged me and my husband. He told us it could be this or that, like other reasons why I'm in labor, and that they were going to try to get the baby to be delivered in the sac to keep it alive as long as possible. Keep it alive? I looked at Robert with panic in my eyes and pain in my heart. I went into full labor as doctor number 2 came on duty. Our midwife left when she had done all she could do, leaving us with strange people whom we've never met. At one point, a big machine of sorts was rolled in. I think now it was an incubator. That scared me as the scene was becoming more and more real. There was one nurse, a tall, thick-built woman with short brown hair. She was our main nurse. Though I don't remember her speaking much, I do remember that when she did speak, there were kind, yet we've got to get this done type of words. The labor was quick, but not pain-free. I only dilated to a 3 or 4. I still had to push and to struggle to get our baby out. Once she popped out, our nurse with the short brown hair whisked her away. All we could see was a very tiny body in her sturdy arms. The way she carried her is etched in my mind for all of time. She didn't cradle our baby. Her arms were bent at the elbows together under her chest like this. You know, if you could see, they were under her chest. Our baby was laying in the space where her arms met. Everything in the room the whole time was quiet, clinical-like. No one really wanted to be there doing this. You could feel the heaviness in the room. As I watched our baby being carried away to the nursery or wherever they took babies who were born too early, I remember asking whether we had a boy or a girl. A girl. They said, our girl. I'm sure we prayed throughout the whole ordeal. I am sure that we held on to one another, talked a bit, trying to make sense of it all. All I can remember thinking is, I want to see our baby. I want to hold her. I also knew that I wanted the medical staff to do all they could to keep her alive, to get her stabilized so she could make it. At some point between our arrival to the hospital and the arrival of Paige, that late August morning, I remember Robert quoting, "All things work out for those who love God." That scripture is what I held on to many times that night, that morning, and ever since. After I was all cleaned up, our pastor and his wife, Doreen, came in carrying red roses. Doreen was a woman of God with a mother's heart. Robert and I had watched her 2 children several times. Her daughter even felt Paige moving in my tummy. And she was looking at me with such compassionate, caring eyes that wanted to hold me and make it all go away. She was at my side when the brown-haired nurse came in and told us Paige didn't make it. She was there to comfort and strengthen. Even after the devastating news, especially after the news, I wanted to see our daughter, to hold her, to see what she looked like. The brown-haired nurse brought her swallowed in a soft yellow receiving blanket, all 1.1 ounce, 11.5 inches of her nestled in that blanket. We weren't prepared to see a baby that much underdeveloped, one that small. Yet I felt the same pride any mom would while holding our firstborn. I remember as I placed her in our arms, thinking just how fragile she looked. Her skin was so thin that we were afraid to touch it, even though we did. She had Grandpa's crooked pinkies. Her eyes were sealed shut, and little eyelashes were starting to form and grow. Her tiny fingers and toes weren't separated all the way either. She had a few um, tiny wisps of brown hair on the top of her head. Though we'll never know what color eyes she had or what her voice sounded like, I have hidden in my heart what she sounded like and the color of her eyes, the way she would have laughed, and her personality. I remember Robert and I saying, "She has your nose, she has my chin," etc., just like all new parents do upon gazing down at their newborn for the first time. With every visitor that came, I had to suppress the desire to show her off, to let people know, to let people ooh and ah over her. Yet I knew people would be morbid, and visitors we had. People from church, young and old, even single men. Each one came uncomfortably into our room. They gave me my own room away from from others in the maternity ward. Not knowing what to say and wanting to make it all go away. Some stopped by with gifts of flowers, cards, almond roca. Some stopped and chatted and made us laugh. I remember a particular group of young folks coming in. A single guy was so uncomfortable. He was one of those guys you left a plate for because you knew he'd be stopping by. I just remember him standing against the wall with tears in his eyes, at a loss for words. I ended up saying something funny, which broke the tension in the room. He replied, "We came to cheer you up, and you're cheering us up." Where did this funny side of me come from, especially at that moment? Answer: the grace of God. The grace of God and the normal post delivery hormone high I got is what carried me through those dark hours of loss and grief and confusion. My best friend Sophie and her husband were with us the most. They were the ones who walked out of the hospital with us. And that day, those emotions are seared into my heart. I remember leaving the nurses who had become our friends, pushed on my tummy, who sat with me when they could, being wheeled out with the candy, flowers, and feeling like I was leaving something behind. My baby. There's nothing like carrying the baby you prayed for 5 months, only to leave her body. I don't remember how much I cried those 24 hours, but I do know I cried getting into our Ranger, looking up at the windows on the third floor. I wanted to run back and grab her tiny body and make everything all better, to go back to yesterday when I was still pregnant, to go back before it hurt so bad. Going back to our house was surreal, to say the least. Our house seemed empty. Robert and I fell on our bed and cried. It was the first time I had ever seen him cry. He tells me that that was the first time he had really cried too. Cry? I did. My poor eyelids weren't just puffy. They were a little bruised too. Only one other time in my life had I cried so hard that I bruised my eyelids. During our first hours home alone, I learned something about Robert that has help keep our marriage glued: his tenderness. During our first hours home alone, I learned something about my husband that has helped keep our marriage glued together. It was his tenderness. To see my husband, you would see a man's man, a former Marine, not one for cards or poems or sappy love songs, though sometimes he does like them. Whether it was that night before bed or the next morning after my shower, I don't remember, but I do know he helped dress me. My body hurt too bad to do it alone. He gently took his time as I sat on the edge of our bed, put one leg into my dark maternity shorts, and then another. He was down on his knees, filled with patience and care. Neither one of us could escape the constant steady sound of the monitors beeping. While I was in labor, they were monitoring Paige's heartbeat, and it was very strong and very steady. We hadn't realized it then how those hospital monitors rang that day, long and loud. For a few days, that beep, beep, beep would ring in our ears and our hearts. It was a sound that we wish we could stop. That same sound would creep into every now and then over the following months. My mom and my grandma came to stay with us for a few days. Unfortunately, I don't remember too much of their visit other than it did me good. They made me eat. They answered the phone, they cleaned, etc. They helped any way they could. How do you take your daughter's pain away? How do you help her heal her griefs? They did in the best way they knew. Meals were brought by the ladies in church. Tears were shed over the babies we each had lost. I can't remember what we ate, but I can remember the faces, the stories, and the love. One of my friends brought over a small white embroidery piece that she had made for me. It had Paige embroidered in mint, surrounded by a heart, in a gold frame. And for a long time, that stayed on displayed by a picture that I had of Paige and the little stuffed animal that they gave me. Another thing that happened that sticks with me is the way my body reacted. I still had post-delivery contractions that were almost as bad as the real ones, and my milk came in. Those were things that nobody told me about. I remember sitting on our rust-colored sofa with my legs up to my chest as I talked to Doreen. She said it was all normal and would go away soon. The contractions did stop, and my milk eventually did dry up. Gone were any signs that I was just pregnant, any signs that I had just had a baby girl. Do you want an autopsy done? What arrangements have you made? And so on and so on. We were riddled with questions we had no answers to, questions that never entered our minds. No, we didn't want an autopsy. We knew why she came too early. Arrangements? No, we don't have any. Thank God that our local mortuary had a plan for these situations. They took care of everything at no charge. About a week after Paige's birth, we got a call from Kim, our nurse at the hospital. Our pictures came in. Somewhere in the hidden area of the hospital is a kind soul who took nice pictures of our daughter, the only ones that we would have. Kim brought us into a birthing room. I'd swear it was the same room, but they probably all look alike. Robert and I sat on the edge of the hospital bed. She handed us a manila folder that contained the only photos we'd ever have of our baby. They did such a lovely job. In the first 5x7, Paige was lying on her left side holding a small stuffed bunny. The hand-knitted bonnet and the booties were trying to stay on. A small yellow cloth was safety pinned around her diaper area. There were several poses taken. They were all taken on the same yellow receiving blanket that she was in when we first held her. In some, she held a pink rose, or she was facing forward or on her back. While those photos never made it into a frame or on our walls, I do know exactly where they are. They each hold a page in a photo album after the pregnant photos. Since I've written this, I've actually, within the past couple of years, have moved the pictures. And honestly, I don't know where they are. I have to go through a bunch of my pictures and find the pictures of Paige because I did have them in a photo album after my pregnancy pictures with her. But as people would go through our photo albums, they would see the picture of Paige and it would just bring up memories and it would bring up it made everybody sad. And so I took them out. And actually my oldest granddaughter has been asking, so I do need to take some time and find them. I have looked in a few places where I thought they were and they aren't there. So I know I have pictures. It will all hit you in about 2 weeks when all of the visitors, the phone calls, when the flowers die, is what my aunt had told me on the phone. Excuse me. She didn't mean it in a bad way at all. Just an experienced warning. She was right. 2 weeks later, it hit me, and it hit me hard. Why did God let this happen? Why don't I have a baby to show off? I cried some more. At my first follow-up appointment, it went really rough. I was still, you have to go for your month checkup. These people didn't read my chart. I don't know. So anyway, at my first follow-up appointment, I was asked questions repeatedly over the years. The same questions that they ask every woman. How many pregnancies have you had? Was it a boy? Was it a girl? How old was she? How old is she now? Very hard questions to ask and to answer when you just lost your baby. So it was very hard. It was a very emotional first visit, and it was a clinic. Since I had seen a midwife, it was a clinic that I just had to go to. So one of the doctor that actually delivered Paige, I had to go to him, and he was in a clinic, and it was literally like a clinic setting and a clinic feeling and a clinic mentality, and they treated you like you're at a clinic. So there was no empathy, no, like, how do you explain to them, my baby came early, she died, so I do remember that was hard. I had no OBGYN, so I got whatever doctor was on duty at the time of my delivery, hence the two doctors. That also meant that I had to do all of my post-pregnancy appointments with the same doctor. A clinic by every means. I saw a different doctor. After it was all said and done, I would bitterly joke that I had seen every doctor there was to see in our small town. So between going into the hospital, um, we was whoever doctor was on call on duty that at that time. So I saw doctor number 1, and then when he got off, doctor number 2, and then I saw doctor number 3 for my follow-up. Let's just say that doctor visit did not go good. This guy had no bedside manners, no care of what I had just been through. I'll spare you the details. I did leave that cold, white office in tears. I drove right to my best friend's house. What's wrong? She asked. I just came back from my checkup, and it was awful. He told me I'd have to wait at least a year to have another baby, or it could fall out. The doctor literally told me like that. She said, "What?" Getting pregnant again was what I was wanting the most. And to be told that I was going to have to wait for that long or the baby would just fall out was heartbreaking. Wait a year or it could fall out. The floor fell out from underneath me. Sophie talked to me, my best friend, talked to me, hugged me, and comforted me. I ended up getting directed to a new doctor in town who takes high risk patients. When I told him what the other doctor said, he laughed. That is why we stitch you up. The layman's term for a cerclage, the procedure that I now need for all of my pregnancies. The doctor gently explained to me, let your body heal for about 6 months, 3 or 4 at least, and then you can get pregnant. That doctor became my favorite doctor of all time that day. When the pregnancy test read positive, I honestly couldn't believe it. The previous 7 months had been filled with continuous negative test results, pregnancy feelings, and many tears. Why isn't God moving? Why am I not pregnant yet? Were asked more than a few times. Even though I had tried not making it my focus and just enjoying my time with my husband. That little pregnancy test took the weight off my shoulders. We were going to have another baby. And another baby we did. And so that is my story of my birth experience of having Paige too early. So a couple of things, a couple of takeaways from our experience. Number 1, it did bring my husband and I closer to each other. It brought us closer to God, and it formed bonds with certain women in the church that I would not have had. Second, I wouldn't have my two biological kids that I have. So the timing of all my pregnancies, had I carried Paige full term, I probably wouldn't have gotten pregnant with Colleen when I did. So I would have completely different kids. And I can't imagine my life without my two oldest. I can't imagine my life without any of my kids, but I can't imagine things going a different way. And so those are the kind of takeaways. And I know also I have a reason to stay safe, not only for what God's done for me and to help my kids to live for God, but I'm gonna get to see her again in heaven. I get to see her. I get to meet her. I get to see what she actually looks like, to hear her voice, and so that's very exciting. Some things that I do want to also talk about how having a baby early affected me. So I kind of mentioned it in my story, but I was pregnant one day, like 5.5 months pregnant, and I did carry small, but you could tell I was pregnant, and people were starting to ask, when are you due, and those type of questions. And then one day I wasn't pregnant. Nobody asked me those questions anymore. Nobody asked about my baby, and I would when I would see other women who were pregnant out in town, it would pain me, and I would feel very empty. For a long time, my arms just felt very empty. And um yeah, my arms felt very empty. There would be like a hole in my heart, kind of like that pain when you would see somebody else pregnant. And then most people who knew us, knew our situation and that we had just lost a baby. And so we didn't get a lot of the questions like, when are you going to have a baby? And how come you guys don't have any kids yet? And things like that. Because it was a good while before we end up getting pregnant again. And so I just remember this one lady, she was kind of newish to the church. And so she wasn't here when we lost Paige. And she would ask me time and time and time again, are you guys going to have any kids? When are you going to get pregnant? Are you going to have any babies? Again and again and again. And I was just like, when God wants, in God's timing, just the general question that you would answer. And then one day I just had enough. And I said, we actually do have a baby and she's in heaven. She died. So she never asked me those questions again. But to those out there who've lost babies, whether through miscarriage or like with my situation, had their babies too early, uh, your babies are in heaven and you get to see them again if you are saved and you have Jesus in your heart. And that is the hope that we have. And it does get easier if you've newly lost a baby, or you've newly if this is still fresh, it does get easier. The first year is definitely the hardest. Everything's a first, like, and then when her due date came up, that was hard. Actually, uh, actually, when I was in the hospital having Paige, there was a couple in the church having their baby at the same time. And literally, they were trying to have me in different positions to try to stop the labor. And so I was on my hands and knees in those hospital gowns. They had the hospital room door open, and the gentleman from church walked by. I was like, shut the doors. I doubt he looked in. But anyway, they had a baby born the same day that Paige was born. And in honesty, it didn't really bother me so much. Uh for a couple of reasons, but the main reason was just God's grace. And then the second reason was so Paige was 1 pound 1 ounce. Their baby was 10-10. It was like seeing an older baby, right? And so that didn't bother me as much as I would think it would have bothered me. But over the years, God has been faithful to help heal that part of my heart. Um, we did have a funeral. It was just my pastor, his wife, and us. we figured nobody knew. We didn't even know what to do. We didn't know in these situations, but we do have a place that we can go and visit her. And occasionally we would. And whenever my dad comes, he goes and visits the cemetery. And actually, my dad's dad, my grandpa, he made headstones for a living. And so Paige's headstone, my grandpa made. So it's very special. And but yeah, that is my story of infant loss, infertility, and I know that these things are hard, and I know the gut-wrenching, the emptiness is real, but I also know that God is there. He's there to fill you. And I know I say this probably with almost every podcast, but God can heal those wounds. He can take away that hurt and give you that peace that one day you will see your baby. Yeah, thank you for listening to my story. And I apologize that I was reading the papers, and I apologize that my camera shut down halfway through. So it's going to be a little different.